Thanks, Lisa. Welcome, everybody, to the third of four cheese o'clocks in this series. This series that you've joined is All American Cheese Society Blue Ribbon winners. So this is the best of the best. And tonight we are focusing on the Green Mountain State, on Vermont. Four fabulous cheeses from Vermont. For a tiny state, it has just an outsized influence in the American artisan cheese industry. And we're going to hear from one of the leaders in the great state of Vermont tonight as well, one of our cheesemakers. Cheese o'clock is something Laura and I dreamed up when COVID first, put us all into lockdown, partly because we just love to teach and wanted to keep teaching, but also because we wanted to put a spotlight on our American artisan cheesemakers, a lot of whom are struggling in the pandemic. So it was a way to kind of keep their sales going and keep our cheese community going. And it's just been a great deal of fun. So thank you for joining us. We have one more coming up on December 3rd and hope you'll join us for that. Hope you will, if you don't have your phone handy, I hope you'll get a handy and maybe take a picture of your cheese board. If you've made a beautiful cheese board tonight with your collection, I hope you'll take a picture and post it to social media, tag Laura and me. We'd love to see what you did. And in a little bit, we're gonna have a screenshot possibility with all of the panelists on the screen. So you may wanna take a selfie at that time and we'll give you a little bit of heads up, but get prepared for that. We'd love to see how your cheese party is going tonight. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Laura.
Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. And I see, I did a quick glance at the chat, and I see we have people from Bozeman, Montana, from New Jersey, from Washington, D.C., from parts of Florida, from cheese and wine lockdown in California. Yes, indeed. And everywhere else. Arvada, Colorado. Anyway, welcome everybody from all over the country. It's so great that you're with us. Janet and I are both in California. Janet's in the Napa Valley. I'm in San Francisco. And then of course our cheesemakers from Vermont and our winemakers from Oregon, which we will get to in just a second. Or actually he's not from Oregon, but he lives there now. Anyway, so I am, my name is Laura Werlin, and I'm a speaker and author of several books on cheese. I'm a virtual tasting host now as well. Funny what happens when a pandemic arises, right? Yeah, that's what I do. And most of all, I am a champion of cheeses, of course, but American cheeses in particular. And as Janet said, what we're celebrating today and what we've been doing in this current Cheese O'Clock series is celebrating blue ribbon winners at the American Cheese, from the American Cheese Society. But I like all American cheeses, whether or not they actually have a blue ribbon on them or not, because of the effort and hard work that goes into making them and the end result. So anyway, we'll get into the American Cheese Society and its importance in our industry and to all of you shortly. But first, I do want to introduce Nate Klosterman. Nate is the winemaker at Argyle Winery, which is in Dundee, Oregon, in the Willamette Valley. And it was founded by a guy named Roland Solis. But Nate, who grew up in Wisconsin, in rural Wisconsin, so he's got cheese in his bones, I would say, had a real interest in home brewing and winemaking, and went to a winery in Minnesota. Yes, there are wineries apparently in Minnesota, and cut his teeth there, but he really wanted to get serious about it. So he went straight to Argyle and joined the team there and quickly rose to become an enologist, or the enologist there under Rollin. And then instead of having to go to the university to get an enology degree, he just went to the School of Argyle, in effect, under Rollin, and learned how to make sparkling wines, among others, which are among the trickiest wines to make. Thanks, Janet. And so in 2013, I think, Nate, you can correct me if I'm wrong, he was named the head winemaker when Rollin decided to become the winemaker emeritus. And so, Nate, welcome. And I'm just so impressed with your background, and that everything you learned in the hills of the Willamette Valley. Not everything, but a lot of it, I guess. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's I got a little bit of I like the agricultural and science background from Wisconsin and Minnesota, but yeah, everything else I've kind of learned on the job here from Rollin and throughout the community here has been lots of hands-on and trial and error, and that's the best way to learn, in my opinion.
Well, and no one's going to argue with that. Trial and error and hands-on and taste-on, I guess. Is that right? I guess, let me just see here. Yeah, so let's go ahead and why don't you tell us about the two wines that we have here today? And then we'll get into it.
Yeah, so we've got two fun wines here today. One sparkling Pinot. It's sparkling Pinot based, and then the other is still wine Pinot based. And so, these come from two different vineyards that we farm here in the Willamette Valley. So I'll talk about the sparkling wine first. So when we started in 1987, it was specifically to make sparkling wine, which is pretty unique to be to be your business focus to start with, because with making sparkling wine, there's a lot of lots of extra labor and time and weird machinery, and a lot of this I'm sure it kind of applies to some of the cheese making world as well, which is really cool. But yeah, it takes a lot of time and patience to get started with a full-on sparkling program. And so we started that in 87. And so this vineyard here, Knutson Vineyard, is what we're tasting tonight. So this is the Knutson Vineyard Brut. This was originally planted in the early 70s. And so kind of the Oregon wine industry took off, or just didn't take off, just started in the mid to late 60s with a few people putting some vines in around the Dundee Hills and a few other areas. And Cal Knutson was a timber guy that had some property in the higher elevations of the Dundee Hills, and he wanted to make wine, and so he planted a few acres in the early 70s as a starting point. And this wine is unique because this is the last of the 1970s plantings that Cal originally put in, and so this is 1972 Pinot Noir is the base for this wine. So it's 90% Pinot with just a small amount of 10% of Chardonnay, also from Knutson Vineyard, is the blend on this wine. And so
and this is a 2015, correct?
Yep.
So, and that's the most recent vintage of this particular single vineyard wine.
We just disgorged the 2016. So this is kind of the current release for the most part, but we do have, every year we disgorge the next vintage. And so the 16 has been disgorged, but it hasn't been out into too many areas yet, just for club members to start with.
Okay. All right. And then the Pinot Noir?
And then the Pinot Noir is this is called Nut House Pinot Noir. This is 2017, and so this is a vineyard that we started planting in 1997, and this is about 20 miles south of the Dundee Hills. It's a little area called the Eola Amity Hills, and so this particular area is known for its windier kind of ramifications there. It's shallow volcanic soils plus wind. So the wines down here have a little bit more structure and tension and acidity, which makes for some of my favorite red wine Pinots and Chardonnays throughout the valley. And so Nut House as the name comes from our current tasting room was an old hazelnut drying facility back in the 80s, early 80s and 70s. And so the name Nut House is an homage to the facility of what it once was for
right.
the winery.
I'm glad you clarified that. I didn't want anyone to think that that's where old winemakers went, was to the nut house. So, yeah. And so just one question is, I don't know the answer to this. Is all of Argyle Estate Vineyard wine, or do you buy some grapes too?
Yep, it's all estate. So
So you are the original grower producer of sparkling wine, huh?
yep.
I mean, that's a heralded thing in France, but anyway. All right, well, so we will taste, I guess, in a second, but Janet, did you want to?
Yeah, I wanted to bring on our other guest, our cheesemaker guest, bring him on the screen, Jeremy Stevenson. Hi, Jeremy, from Springbrook
Janet.
Farm
Hey,
in
everybody.
Vermont. Jeremy, we're going to give him a chance to speak in a little bit, but I just wanted you to get a good look at him and remind you that there is a Q&A on your, this Q&A function on Zoom. So we hope if you have some questions that can't be answered in the chat that maybe you want us to answer live, you'll use the Q&A function. I know that Rick Woods from another one of our cheesemakers whose cheeses we're tasting today is on the call. And I think possibly some Vermont Creamery people on the call. So you can, take advantage of that. Ask your cheese questions because we have some experts on the chat to help you out. Also wanted to mention that all the cheese collections for Cheese O'Clock are still on iGourmet, the 4 Cheese O'Clock collections in this series. So if you wanted to maybe get week 1 now or get week 2, you can still buy it. And the recordings are on my site and on Laura's site as well. So you can, have another cheese party of your own. And of course, next week, we're skipping next week because of Thanksgiving, but on December 3rd, we're going to be doing 4 states, 5 stars. Initially started out as 4 states, 4 stars, but one of the cheesemakers was an overachiever and tossed in an extra cheese. So we have 5 fabulous blue ribbon cheeses for you to taste on December 3rd with Charles Krug Winery wine. So please sign up for that. Get your cheeses and wines ready. There's still time to order. Okay, Laura, you want to get started on the tasting?
I do, but first I want everybody to do their selfie. Okay, so take your phone, hold it up so you can see your cheeses, which of course I can't see myself, but in mine. And take a picture of the screen, your cheeses, your wines, and then there you go. And post it. Whenever, not right now, you have to listen, but after that. Okay. All right, now to the cheese. And yes, Chris Muncie from Vermont Creamery, I think, is joining in behind the scenes. So if you have any questions for Vermont Creamery directly, please ask. Now, we got a question in the chat, which was, do we taste the Brut now? The answer is yes, because you want to taste the wine before you taste any cheese. So let's take a sip of Nate's beautiful Knudsen Vineyard 2015 Brut. Oh, so good. Gosh.
Yeah, it just
Wait,
gets your juices flowing. To me, this is the best aperitif of all. A glass of really bright, lively, vivacious sparkling wine. It just gets your appetite aroused, and I'm ready for cheese. Something creamy. I'm ready for something creamy because that wine is very, it's very austere, and you want something creamy to balance it. What you got?
It's very focused, and it's going to go, I think, extremely well with this first cheese. So this cheese is Vermont Creamery's Bonne Bouche, which means good mouthful. And Vermont Creamery was founded in 1984 by 2 people named Allison Hooper and Bob Reese. Allison was working at a milk lab, and she was milking goats. And then Bob was working for the Vermont Department of Agriculture and had to put together a whole dinner using Vermont products. And so he knew that Allison was doing this thing, and she had an internship already in Brittany in France, cheese making. So he called on her to make some goat cheese. And the rest is history. From there came what was called Vermont Butter and Cheese, because they made both of those things and still do. And then it was shortened to Vermont Creamery, which actually it might have started as, but anyway. Then, so their aged cheeses came along a little bit later. And by the way, back in 2004, they hired an intern who is now the CEO because in 2017, Bob and Allison retired. So she is from France and has come a long way from intern to president of Vermont Creamery. All right, so first of all, first things first with the Vermont Creamery, you see that it comes in this box, and it's obviously inherently a soft cheese. So how the heck do you get it out of the box, you might be wondering. So what I do is I take my knife and I just slide it along the bottom, a flat knife like this. And then what I do is I take the knife out. Hopefully I've loosened it well enough. And I take my plate and hopefully it comes out in one piece, which it pretty much did. And that's how you get Vermont Creamery Bonne Bouche out of the box. Hopefully you don't have to put it back in because you've finished it. But even if you do, they do it the same way. Okay, so this cheese is made the same way it's always been. They put the milk in little buckets. And then they add the not starter culture, actually, it's a lactic set, meaning that it sits for 24 hours with a little bit of rennet, and then it basically and some cultures, I imagine, and then it just sets. And then what they do is when it's ready to go, they hand ladle it, meaning when it's ready, meaning that the curds have set, they scoop it out into the Bonne Bouche molds, which are the original molds still to this day, the forms. And then they work with it and put it in the aging room for just about 10 days or so, and then off to market it goes, 10 to 14 days. And the gray color on the outside, that's edible vegetable ash. It's used in these traditional goat cheeses, which are traditionally from the Loire Valley of France, and basically it's mostly just aesthetic, though it does have some ripening properties as well. Okay, so let's dig in, and
Laura,
we'll try it with the wine. Yeah,
I just wanted to comment. When you sort of talk to us about how to open that package, the Vermont Creamery packaging is just something to be admired. You know, they have taken that so seriously along the way. And I just love the way they take care of their cheeses right to the end in terms of that package, which gets to the consumer. It's so important. And many of us are just starting to learn about that.
interesting.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how hard it is to get a cheese like that to market from Vermont to California. This is a very fragile cheese, and it needs to stay humid en route. So that's why they devised this little mini cave, they call it, to keep it protected and to keep it humid. A lot of extra effort and expense in that, but it's why every piece of Bonne Bouche is always so good. This is like as good a piece as Bonne Bouche. I always love this cheese, but this is just spectacularly perfect.
And Jeremy, you can probably appreciate this. One of the things that Adeline, their CEO, their president, shared with me is that these soft ripened cheeses, because they have a much shorter shelf life, it's a harder sort of category of cheeses right now to sell since the pandemic. And I don't know if it's because people just want hard cheeses because they want to minimize their trips to the store and therefore they get the longer lasting cheeses, or what it is. But I just want everyone to not only appreciate cheeses like this cheese, but others like it, but also understand that those really do need to move off the shelf. So please buy them when you choose your cheeses.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So take a taste, and then, like I say, let's go for the Knudsen Vineyard Argyle Brut.
Actually, it goes with both wines, in my opinion. And I see that there's a question on the chat, on the Q&A, about the rind, and is it supposed to be wrinkled? And the answer is yes. This rind is what's cheese people kind of informally call it a brainy rind, because it looks wrinkled like that. I always think it looks like the skin of a Shar-Pei dog, but it's supposed to be that way, and it's because of a yeast. It's called geotrichum that they add to the milk, and it creates this wrinkly rind on the outside, and that's why the cheese gets so soft and creamy from the outside in. So yes, it's intentional and it's edible, and I'm finding this cheese just beautifully lactic and perfectly salted, perfectly, creamy. I think somebody else on the Q&A said theirs was a bit runny. You know, it's supposed to be soft, runny, maybe not, but
Mine is both. Mine is soft and runny. It's both. So I'd like to bring in. I have two questions, Nate, for you. One is, first of all, well, somebody was asking in the chat. Maybe you can explain why, even though this is an apparently white wine, you say it's 90% Pinot Noir. So maybe you can explain why it's a white wine, why it looks white, even though it's mostly Pinot. And then tell us. Yeah, I think that it's a good idea to try this with the try this cheese with both of your wines. So tell us tell us both things.
Yeah, so the way that we make this, so we take red skin Pinot Noir and it turns out white. So you have to. It's kind of like steeping tea. To get the color out, you need to leave the wine on the skin, so that's how you get the color in the other wine. But if we want a white wine like this for sparkling wine, we will just apply pressure to the berries, put them in our press, and pop the berries, and then we get nice clear juice that comes out and doesn't have any color to it. But the cool thing about Pinot and with sparkling wine is, even though you are pressing it clear and without color, you still do pick up a lot of those characters that Pinot Noir brings that you might associate with a red wine, but on a much more subtle scale. So lots of, in comparison to a sparkling wine that would be more Chardonnay driven, these Pinot Noir driven sparkling wines have more body, richness, more spice. You can even pick up some of those red fruit characters as well. But yeah.
Well, did you have a preference between the sparkling wine and the Pinot with the cheese, Nate?
I love the sparkling wine with this. I love sparkling wine cutting through creamy foods, whether that be cheese or a nice creamy oyster or something like that. So I'm always a sucker for sparkling wine and creamy combinations.
I am too. I think that's that's just as two general categories, creamy and sparkly. That's a great kind of guideline to live by.
It's a party. Yeah.
It's definitely a party, and it's actually a safe one if you want to know what cheeses and wines to pair together. Sparkling and creamy, just go for it. Jeremy, you like the combo?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to our next cheese, which kind of looks the same, but it's not. I mean, it's got a bloomy white rind, but this is a different rind. This is a penicillium mold, and not the geotrichum that we had before. Mine is super ripe, and I can tell because it's sunken here, and it's kind of very soft around here. And actually, I love this packaging too, because this came in a clamshell to protect it. And it had this wonderful labeling. And did you all did you have your own cow? I have a little cow card that tells me about Lily Bell. That's my cow. And she's about 10 years old. And she's one of the oldest cows in the herd here. And it takes 7 pounds of her milk in a day makes 7 pounds of cheese. I just love this. It just really personalizes the farm. This is a farmstead cheese, meaning that all the milk for this cheese came from the farm's own animals, kind of like an estate wine. And there aren't that many of them in the US, so we like that. And it's a very interesting story about this creamery, because if you go back about 15 years ago, the property was owned by the gentleman who patented the LASIK, the eye treatment procedure, LASIK surgery. And of course, he made a fortune. He bought a place in Vermont, and he had the idea of bringing in water buffalo from Italy. And he kind of thought, oh, when I have dinner parties, we can have our own water buffalo mozzarella. And it grew beyond that. And he ended up with a herd of water buffalo and somewhere in the cheese business. Well, long story short, it didn't succeed. People really struggled with water buffalo cheese, and his project didn't succeed. And that property was about, to be sold and become a meat processing facility. And the neighbors were very unhappy. They liked having the water buffalo. They didn't want a meat processing facility in their backyard. So they banded together, the neighbors in this part of Vermont, it's Woodstock, Vermont, and they jointly bought this property to keep it in cheese making, keep it, rural. And so now it's now a Vermont Farmstead is a community owned creamery. I don't know of any others actually. It's owned by the people of the community or the investors from the community. And they hired a cheesemaker from Grafton Village nearby. He's on the call today. And another thing I love about this cheese, I hope you have your packaging, because on the bottom of the package, it has the day it was made. And it's in a code, which I'm going to translate for you. It's called Julian code. The first 2 digits, 20, are the year. And the next 3 digits are the day of the year. So out of 365, mine said, I think 253 or 256. It turns out my make date was September 3rd. So my cheese is about 70 days old, which is close to its end. They say about 90 days. Some of you have a younger piece because iGourmet ran out and had to get some more fresh ones from the creamery. So some of you have a younger piece. Mine is like now, eat it now. So I'm gonna cut into it. It's 100% cow milk, and it is called Lillet from Vermont Farmstead. They sometimes call it Lillet Coulommiers. Coulommiers is a French. Coulommiers is a French cheese that's kind of like a brie or a camembert, and this Lillet is a different. Coulommiers is shaped like a brie or a camembert, a little bit bigger, and they make this Lillet Coulommiers in 2 sizes. They make it the normal kind of large brie size, and then they make it this tall little guy, which is easier for shops to sell. So let's get inside it and taste it. And I'm curious, from those of you, I hope you'll say on the chat if you have a different one. I mean, mine is super oozy and buttery mushrooms. I'm getting mushrooms.
Very mushroomy. Kind of salted mushrooms, salted butter and mushrooms. I also, by the way, they bought a cracker company because if you're making cheese, why not make crackers too? So they bought the Whitney Castleton Cracker Company, and I actually really love their crackers. They're very buttery. They actually do have butter in them, and so they're all made right there. Not in the original spot where they bought the farm, but nearby. And I guess it's like a whole complex. I don't know, Jeremy, if you've been there before, but it's I forget the name of it.
I haven't been to the
Park. It's called Artisans Park. You have not been there. Okay.
Do you mean down in Windsor? Absolutely. Yes. Well, I wanted to say Farmstead Cheese is a stone's throw away from Springbrook Farm. And I was lucky enough to be to watch Rick and his fellow cheesemaker, who he has trained, making their soft cheese. And I wish Rick would jump in. He's just such an amazing cheesemaker. And also, I wanted to comment on their packaging as well, which, as Janet mentioned, is really great, very well designed for the product. But Rick explained to me how you can take the same curd and put it into different shapes, and you will have a completely different kind of aging process and development in that cheese. So I don't know if he's able to jump in or not.
Well, I've had it in the other form. I've had it in the brie shape form.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I've had it, actually. And I mean, there actually are some similarities in terms of, call it terroir, I don't know, cultures, everything else. But it's true, the format really does inform the flavor a lot.
And as he said to me, and we spoke on the phone a couple of days ago, he really likes it at about 60 days, but it's interesting at multiple stages, depending on what you like, because when it's younger, it's going to have a firmer core. And so you get three different experiences. You get the rind, you get the creaminess right under the rind, and then you get that firm core. So that can be very nice. But if you like it really strong, you're going to want it later in the aging process. I think when I get these mushrooms, which is what I'm still smelling and tasting, I think Pinot,
Yeah.
and I think it's just sublime with your Pinot, Nate. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, well, number one, that's my favorite pairing for Oregon Pinot is mushrooms, wild mushrooms, especially around the area here. They grow really well. Chanterelle mushrooms, like to go hunting for those, and there's just like this magical synergy, and with Pinot, this elevates the intensity and savory, and the fruit kind of combines with it. This just makes everything pop, and the length is really what I love in particular. Like those two just kind of Pinot and mushroom length just kind of keep going back and forth, and just goes on and on and on.
Well, which of course throws my earlier theory out the window, creamy cheeses and sparkling wine. But actually that works too. It's just a different experience. But the Pinot is unusually good with this cheese. Okay, I think we probably need to keep moving here so we can get to everything. So as you have all already met, Jeremy Stevenson is the cheese program director at Springbrook Farm Cheese in Vermont, naturally. And he is also the president of the American Cheese Society, which I alluded to earlier. And so Jeremy, before we talk about Springbrook, if you could just give us a minute on what the ACS, the American Cheese Society, is, what its importance is, how the American cheese, artisan cheese, or not just artisan, but cheese making community, how they're doing right now.
Just a minute, Jeremy.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'll try to be really brief. So this is my 6th year on the board of the American Cheese Society. And I can tell you in 6 years getting to this one, it's been quite a journey. But let's just go back and say that it was founded approximately 30 years ago by a gentleman named Frank Kozakowski from Cornell University. And his intention there was to bring cheesemakers together, this nascent artisan cheese community, to learn about technical aspects of cheese. And Frank Kozakowski was a cheese expert. He's got a book which is available from the American Cheese Society today, which covers, cheese globally and every form of fermented milk. But the purpose of the Cheese Society to begin with, and I think still today, is to help cheesemakers learn to better their abilities and perform their craft at a higher level. So he found a lot of folks were not very, okay, so you can tell me to slow down, Janet, because I could just go on now for 20 minutes, now that I'm on a roll here, about how this started, because it's really interesting. But I'll try to shorten it. I'm going to cut myself off and just say, he brought folks together. They connected as a community. The concept was to bring cheese technology to people that would really wanted to connect with the animals and the land, and then this special fermented product that we call cheese. And it's I think the Cheese Society's taken a journey from that time when he assigned it to one of his graduate students as that person's job. Paul Kinstead was asked to organize the first meeting, and it's gone on from there. But I think at the core, we've always tried to keep education and cheese knowledge as the primary focus of the American Cheese Society. And along with that goes community. And I'll just say that, skipping ahead to this year of the pandemic, when we've had to just, consider the unthinkable, which is to cancel our annual conference, still the support from the community is amazing. And the strength of that community is what makes the American Cheese Society. We board members cycle through and come and go. You know, I'm going to have a meeting with the past presidents in the next few days. And it's just so great to connect with all of them. And everybody's done their piece along the way to try to strengthen this organization, keep it going for American cheese. And think about American cheese and how it's come along the way. If you think about Vermont Creamery, you know, if you think about Grafton Village Cheese, where Rick came from, and then Farmstead Cheese today, these are cheese companies in Vermont that have a long history, and certainly Allison Hooper and Bob Reese were pioneers in that community. And you can see where they got to today in refining their products and bringing them to the table. So it's all tied together with this growth of American cheese, which I know both you, Janet, and Laura have been so strongly behind and promoting as well.
Well, you know, I mean, when Frank Kozakowski started the ACS, there were just a handful of people, and I don't know what the membership is now, but it's a million.
Yeah. Well, we talk about in terms of actual individuals that can log in as members, it's around 2,300. And, you know, we just opened membership, you know, this renewals in the last month or so, and we got like 60% renewal, which is just a huge statement from this community that, you know, ACS is important. And I think they understand we're struggling right now with just not being able to get together and do what we do. But I will also say that, you know, the folks I'm on the board with are really committed to bringing all of these things forward, and maybe not being quite so conference centric as we have been. And you know, we've gotten into some pretty great routines, but maybe it's a time to sort of mix it up a little bit. And then I can't end this regarding the Cheese Society without mentioning Laura and the ACE Foundation, which is there to support the American Cheese Society, and the ACE Foundation, which Laura has been very much a part of for many years, is super important.
Thank you. Well, so I think there's no better kind of segue to your farm, and specifically though we're going to show a video of Springbrook Farm, and it really it brings home the story of Springbrook for sure, but it also kind of tells the larger story of many American cheesemakers, and you know, not variations on the theme, but really what it takes to make great cheese. So Lisa, if we could roll that video, that'd be great. Well, I, for one, want to be a city kid on the Springbrook Farm. I'll tell you that.
I think we need an adult week, a camp for the rest of us.
Yeah, we hear that.
Yeah. Well, for good
Jeremy,
reason.
tell us about this beautiful cheese.
Well, yeah, so I can't tell you exactly what the age is. Do you want to tell me which one you have there, Janet?
We have the
Redding, you know, sticky Redding. I don't know how old
Right.
it is.
So
Okay.
So what happened in that first year when Alex Pelissier, who came to Springbrook Farm to teach me how to make cheese in 2008, we finished the summer after making Tarentaise that year, and he looked in at the aging room and he said, you know, in France we would never leave a facility like this dormant over the winter, because at that time the idea was we were going to make summer cheese for 6 months. And he said, if you ever have a problem selling Tarentaise, just let me know, because there are some other cheeses you can make with this equipment. So to back up a little bit, we have French cheese equipment. You saw the copper vat there. All of our equipment actually was brought in from France. And Alex came over to teach myself and 2 other people about the process, and spent 4 months with us that first year. So along the way, you know, as Lisa mentioned in the video, we're there to support the foundation, and to just try to do that with 6 months worth of milk a year would not actually work. So in part for that reason, we began to make the Reading cheese, which was the next cheese that Alex suggested we make, which is a raclette style cheese. And I will say that the really nice thing about that, as Lisa mentioned again, is that we've been able to support 2 other dairy farms in sourcing milk outside the Springbrook herd, which is just 40 cows. So we have 2 other dairies, 60 cows and 30 cows, all Jersey. And I think the process is very similar to a Swiss raclette. I was in Switzerland and watched a cheesemaker making a raclette style cheese and was just kind of amazed at how comfortable the make process was to me. I was very familiar with it. I understood all the steps. And so I realized, yeah, I'd been taught very much a traditional French, Swiss style of cheese making, which fit. And the difference is though that we're using Jersey cow milk in Vermont. And getting back to an estate vineyard, you talk about Farmstead and their herd, which is sourced, they're sourcing milk for certain cheeses from their herd. That really does have an impact, just as it would with wine. So breed of cow, and then our farms are within 20 miles of Springbrook. So we also work directly with those farms to make sure that the milk is made without fermented feed, which is a very key requirement for our style of cheese. And so, I would just say that the raclette style turned out to be a really valuable product for Springbrook, both financially because it really does drive the engine, but also in terms of quality and just likability. It's a very accessible cheese. I think you would agree.
It's accessible, but it's also very complex. I mean, it's got layers and layers of flavor and texture going on. I mean, sometimes people don't like to eat the rind of certain washed rind cheeses, as this one is, but this one's beautiful.
It's
my
super-
guidance on. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, I was just going to say it's super meaty, beefy to me, very concentrated. This is a cheese that just exemplifies umami, that very hot, savory taste. And folks, if most of you probably had raclette in a restaurant, but it's for those who haven't, raclette is not only the name of the cheese, but it's a dish where you melt the cheese over boiled potatoes. And usually you have some little cornichon or like pickled onions alongside. So this is a fabulous melting cheese. And, in France, they stick it under this kind of a broiler that melts the surface, and then they scrape the surface off onto your plate. You can do it at home. You don't need to have that fancy equipment. Jeremy, I'm curious how you do it, but what I do is I cut slabs about a 1/4 inch thick, and I put it on a baking sheet under the broiler. I have my potatoes already and my cornichon, and then you just flip it off onto your potatoes. And
that's perfect. You can invest a little bit of money in some really fun party type raclette devices, and they're really, really nice. And we do own one, but still at the same time, if I'm in the mood for some melted cheese and I want to do that in a quick way, I'll take a cast iron pan even, and just lay that cheese in there at a very low heat. And within a short time, you'll have a beautiful layer of molten cheese that you can just pour over, as well as any, traditionally scraped, you understand the term raclette it's a French term for scraping. And traditionally this would be a half wheel of cheese facing a fireplace with a roaring fire, and the face of the cheese would become molten, and you just scrape it off. And that's really dramatic and tremendous amount of fun.
It is.
But you don't
I'm curious
have to
what Nate thinks. I'd love to know what Nate thinks, because I found that this is a bit of a challenge, this cheese for wine. And Nate, I'd love to know if you had a preference.
I would prefer, I like the red wine Pinot. I like the little bit more enhanced red, like fruit character that helps balance with the umami and salty character that I like that interplay.
I think the fruit character is even enhanced by the cheese.
Yeah, totally.
It's almost like a contrasting pairing of the umami and the fruit. So Jeremy, we got a question that I think you should be able to answer. Somebody wanted to know why this, and maybe they went ahead and tried the Invierno, which I'm guessing because I had the same experience. The term they use is a little bit of spiciness, which I think is maybe the histamine, but what would you surmise?
It can be histamine, but it's not always. And that is very common with some of these Alpine style cheeses. And so what I'll say is that with our cheeses, first of all, they're seasonal. So when you're tasting them, understand that if it's a summer cheese, you will get more of the fruity, grassy notes even. Tends to translate into fruit, I would say. Even pineapple in some cases. But in the winter, you'll get the more savory flavors. But so seasonality is an issue or a factor in the flavor of the cheese. And then we'll also find that with the change in the milk composition, we're going to adapt our process to the milk. So milk fat ratios and other things related to seasonality usually will change. And so instead of adding anything to the milk or standardizing the milk, we're going to roll with that and adapt our cheese making so that we hit our parameters for the cheese production. And then we sort of celebrate those variations over the year.
And so that might create, so what's the spiciness that people are detecting?
Yeah, the spiciness could well be from an amine at a very low level. What we watch is we don't want to see that climb too high.
I'm sorry, can you explain that? A what? What did you say?
He said he doesn't want to see it climb too high.
No, we don't want to see it.
What is the it?
So a small amount is acceptable. And I think with that, you also have to be aware that I think some of us are much more sensitive than others to it. I happen to be very sensitive to it also. So, I pick it up really quickly.
So just so the person who's the attendee who asked that question, there's nothing wrong with the cheese. It's just, it's kind of a natural thing that happens with these Alpine style cheeses. With some of them.
Things that I wanted to bring up was, one is that Jeremy just really gave you the definition of artisan cheese when he said that they don't standardize the milk. They adapt their procedures and their recipe to the milk that they get every day. Whereas a more, commodity cheese, they're going to standardize the milk. They're going to alter the fat and the protein so that they don't have to change the recipe. I think that's a pretty concise definition of what artisan cheese is all about. It really takes artistry and adaptability. I also know there was a question on the Q&A that I want to answer, because before we get closer to the end, there was a cherry honey conserve that came with your shipment. Nice little surprise for my gourmet. I don't know this product, but it was delicious. And it's just a condiment for cheese. If you want to have a little something sweet with these salty cheeses, it's up to you. If you want to save it for breakfast, it's up to you. But it's
what's nice about it is that it's basically a honey-based product with
sour cherries, right?
Yeah. And so, but it's not, when you hear honey, you think super sweet, but it's actually not.
It's yummy.
The cherries are kind of tart, so it's kind of a nice sweet tart. And I would, in terms of what to put it with, I would say try it with all 4 cheeses and see what you like, because that's all that matters.
We have one more cheese, which is also from Vermont, and it is from Vermont Shepherd, and which makes you think it's sheep's milk, but it's only partially sheep's milk. It's about 10% sheep's milk and 90% cow. It's called Invierno, which means winter. So it's the cheese that this creamery makes in winter. They also make a cheese in summer called Verano, which is 100% sheep's milk. But this is raw milk, and as the Reading was. And this Vermont Shepherd was the first sheep dairy in the US. Making sheep cheese is really tough. It's just a hard business economically. So they have, they've continued to make that cheese and win awards for it, but they've also developed this mixed milk cheese, which gives them a cheese that they can make in winter when they have less sheep's milk. So in fact, there's a little surprise. Cheese is made with frozen milk. The sheep milk is frozen because they take it in October and November when they still have some in it at its most rich, and they freeze the milk so that they continue to make this cheese for the next 3 or 4 months until they have fresh sheep milk again. So this cheese was made on February 3rd. I'm checking my notes. February 3rd, 2020. So it's about a 9-month-old cheese. Again, so 10% was sheep's milk, but you get more curd out of the sheep's milk because it's so high in fat and protein than you do out of the cow's milk. So I'm going to guess, maybe Jeremy can correct me, that if you're looking at just how much curd went into this cheese, it's probably more like 30% sheep and 70% cow. So natural rind, this is just what's in their cave. And let's taste it. David Major is the cheesemaker and owner with his wife.
I think they might have had the first caves, the first actual underground caves, perhaps in the US, for sure in Vermont.
David's another, he's a pioneer, to be sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful guy, and still very involved in the cheese community in Vermont.
The cheese has, to me, I get a little bit of a caraway flavor. Like I first thought rye, and then I thought maybe a little bit of caraway. And almost got a little smokiness or something, or just maybe a beef flavor. I don't know.
It's up there in salt and acidity. It's it's a very intense cheese, which is you would expect after 9 months. I'm not getting a whole lot of what I was of sheepy character. I don't know that I would have known this was part sheep.
Except that it's got that, even though it has a savoriness to it that I feel like that's the sheep milk contribution, that if it were all cow's milk, it'd be maybe a little bit more buttery or something, but it's
surprisingly creamy. I mean, it's not hard, dry, granular. For a 9-month-old cheese, it's really still got a lot of moisture in it.
I wonder if that's the cow's
I'm going for the red wine. I'm going straight for the red.
Yeah, so Nate, I loved it with the Pinot. What do you think?
I think there's some good versatility here between both the wines, just because of that kind of sneaky creaminess in this wine that goes well with the bubbles, but just kind of the like I said before with the red wine, the fruit character pairing with some of the more umami and saltiness. I think it's versatile with both wines.
It is, but I find that the sparkling wine kind of cuts the richness a little bit of the cheese. The cheese kind of sneaks up on you. A little goes a long way. All of these, that's the case. But with this one, and so the sparkling is just very refreshing, which makes me want to have more of the Invierno and then more of the Brut, and then there how it goes. Not a bad thing.
Totally.
I know we're almost finished, but I wanted to just compliment Nate on these wines. They're just phenomenal. I mean, thank you so much. And what surprised me is that for me, the Pinot works best with the Redding. For me,
yeah.
And usually you expect the white to be the kind of winner on that, but it's such a beautiful wine.
Cool. We have a question from the audience, and I want to toss it to the cheesemaker. It's how do you know when you can eat the rind and when you can't?
Well, honestly, with our rinds, I mean, certainly if it's waxed, I wouldn't try that. I mean, you can, but you're probably going to want to spit the wax out. I make that decision based on texture and mouthfeel. What I will say, so with our Tarentaise cheese, which has a much drier, harder rind, I generally don't eat that rind. It's completely edible. If it wasn't, we'd have a food safety problem, just like a cantaloupe. I mean, you can't, you won't become safe by trimming the rind away. Just make that point. If you got a problem with your rind, you've got a problem with your cheese. But I think the Redding is much more approachable along with our Ashbrook in terms of eating the rind. The Tarentaise tends to be dry. What I'll say, though, is make a point of tasting very close to the rind, because you'll have a completely different experience from the center of a wheel of our cheese out to that rind. And that rind completely informs the paste right through. But you're going to have a lot more fun if you play with it that way, you know. There are different parts of that wheel of cheese. It's not just a homogeneous thing when you have a natural rinded cheese like these.
I love what
Yeah,
you
Jeremy-
said. Oh, I'm sorry. When you said when you have trouble with the rind, you have trouble with the cheese. I mean, that's exactly that. But not in a dangerous sense, just that the cheese inside might not be so great if the
Well,
outside is not.
I guess I'm just making that statement from a food safety standpoint, but it's really all about what you like and what your preference is. But I'll just point out that you do get a better, you get quite a range of flavor in some of these naturally aged, you know, natural rind cheeses. If you taste close to the outside, you may not want to eat the outside itself. I mean, it's the case with the softer cheeses too, right? I mean, you tend to get a little more of that ammonia sometimes, or you get more acidity. So, you know, it varies a lot, but I would just say there's no hard and fast rule, I don't think.
Well, your colleague, Rick Woods, weighed in and said he likes to taste the part on a harder cheese just under the rind. So
yeah,
there you go.
Before we
Exactly.
wrap it up, I do want to mention that, you know, we keep hearing about this Tarentaise from Springbrook Farm, and Jeremy's too modest to say it, but while Reading was a blue ribbon winner, Tarentaise has won a zillion blue ribbons and best of show, right, Jeremy? Tarentaise Reserve has been best of show.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
You know, Springbrook Farm is just
Thank you
real,
both. Yep.
A standard bearer, and Vermont in general has been kind of setting that pace for the rest of the nation in terms of artisan cheesemaking. So it's been just a great fun to taste these four and have them with Argyle wines, which have been a discovery for me. And I want to remind everybody about the next and final Cheese O'Clock in this series on December 3rd. Please sign up. Please, if you would like to taste along with us, there's still time to get your cheeses and your wines. Laura, final thoughts?
Well, just to add on to that, you can find out about that December 3rd event on Janet's and my websites, both of them, for those of you who didn't hear that at the beginning. So you can sign up through that, and we hope that you do, because this is a lot of fun. And we hope you think so too. And I would just like to thank Jeremy and like to thank Nate, thank Argyle Wines. It's, you know, this is just such a special moment in time in our world. And to have these moments with people like you, Jeremy, you, Nate, you, Janet, these amazing cheeses and wines, we're just incredibly, incredibly fortunate to be able to be in this cheese and wine bubble for this hour. And we couldn't do it without all of you who are watching and listening. So thank you to everybody. Really appreciate it.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much.